Oh man, here we go. More bad gameplay. Can't fucking scale this building. Why is the fucking camera so bad, man? It's like they have this fucking lock-on system, but you can't see anything around you. This is fucking ridiculous, man. Just fucking awful. I can't see anything that's around me. I fucking have to cancel the lock on and shit. But if I do that, then I can't keep track of the boss. And also, the bird. These motherfuckers couldn't give this thing a better name. Forspoken, a game from infamous Japanese developer Square Enix, attempts to take a modern spin of a classic fairy tale set within an open world experience. Now, back in January when this fucking thing released originally, Square Enix was initially charging $70 for this mess. Not only that, but they released a demo that detailed everything that was wrong with the concept they were going for. With a bland, lifeless open world, janky combat that felt unfinished, and uninspired art direction that felt like unused Final Fantasy XV concept art, mindless open world clutter out the ass, and terrible dialogue from an annoying main character with even worse banter to boot. And you had a game that I was not willing to spend a dime on. It's worth noting that I didn't spend $70 full price on this bullshit, instead spending around $30 less through a sale weeks ago. Having spent over 15 hours recently trudging through this disaster, and I'm wondering why I even bother with Square Enix anymore, either as a consumer or a critic. I could go on a tangent and describe Square Enix's long laundry list of failures over the last 15 years plus to emphasize why this company hasn't released a single good game developed in-house in over a decade. But I'll skip the formalities and just move straight to the point. Forspoken is not a good video game. Rather, it's a very bad video game that has so much potential with a decent concept that's been ruined with sheer stupidity. The reception for this garbage was so swift during the week of its release that the development studio Luminous Productions, who made this game, was effectively shut down, having its employees being siphoned off to other development studios within Square Enix's overall house at large. That's how bad this game is. I'm not making any jokes or brash judgments. I spent hours playing this mess and enjoyed it not even 20% of the total runtime. But again, that's how bad this game is. As I scrolled through the fucking Metacritic scores to see which ones I would include in the thumbnail for this video, I found it astounding that fucking Easy Allies, a bullshit remnant full of idiots of what used to be GameTrailers.com, had the balls to give this game an 80 review score. This is why I've never taken that review publication seriously when factoring a game's value. With everything that's wrong with this game, it's borderline insanity that anyone with some common sense would give this game anywhere near an 80 review score. And there were some reviews that went above even that. Realistically, Forspoken is nowhere near even a 60 if you weigh its pros and cons accurately. Going over the pros briefly. Alright, there's not much to discuss in the way of positivity, so I'll skip to the cons, and there's a lot of them. First and foremost, this is an open world game, and it's not a good one. This is one of the worst open world games I've played in a very long time. It's bland as fuck, it's empty as all hell, the map loads slow with consistent freezing, the legend icons all have the same fucking color palette, making it annoying to distinguish what is what. To make matters worse, there is just one fucking town across the entire game. One that's full of boring side quests and dull-minded placeholder NPCs. As an open world game, this is nothing new. Absolutely zero original ideas are present here, but that's not quite the problem. Like any other genre, there's a formula that's needed to make a competent and fun experience with an open world game. The first half of the battle is exploration. It needs to be fun actually exploring the open world. The flow ability, which sees the Frey character zip through the environment, scaling tall mountainous structures with relative ease, is a good mechanic. The problem is that the open world is so big that it renders the ability useless because it doesn't allow the player to get from one point to the next within a short period of time without relying on the fast travel system. It feels like it takes an eternity to get from one point to another that's several kilometers away because the flow ability isn't good enough to cover that span of distance quickly. Combined with a world that's full of nothing but monsters similar to a game like Elden Ring, and you have a game that stands for the opposite of what a fun open world experience looks like, despite what the mainstream audience would have you believe. This is all but baffling considering that Square Enix made a proper open world game with Final Fantasy XV along with Forspoken was developed by the same development team. How they went from that game to this one and got worse makes no sense. But the open world is just the fucking beginning with what's wrong with Forspoken. Because this is an RPG title, it relies on various systems and mechanics that are all too familiar at this point. One such system is crafting, the ability to make healing items and extend item capacity. This, of course, relies on the player gathering resources in the open world. Not only is this unoriginal, it's not done to any degree that encourages the player to be invested. That's because all it is involves gathering literally every fucking small collectible you randomly pass by in the open world. This effectively makes the game intensely tedious because it's nothing more than a fucking mindless collectathon. You encounter various checkpoints which are small shacks that contain the exact same interiors with the same bed and bookshelf in the exact same spot for each one that's been randomly copy and pasted throughout the open world. It's baffling that no one on the development team stopped and said, maybe we should at least change the layout of these things so not each one literally looks the same as the last one the player just entered. I guess that idea was tossed out in pre-production. Aside from being unoriginal and just a complete bore at world exploration, Forspoken suffers from egregious character design. Every enemy in this game borders on the most generic designs possible. Let's throw in a giant bear because why not? Let's throw in some mystical elk, some mystical wolves, some mystical crows, because why not? Fuck it. Let's also throw in some zombies in here too. There is no effort here that gives the impression that Square Enix isn't simply phoning it in. There is never a point where it feels like Luminous Productions took more than 5 minutes to conjure a list of enemies that feel distinct to this game, probably because they didn't try. The enemies, ironically, aren't even the worst designs in the game. The worst is actually the main character, Frey herself. Her design would be competent if it weren't for one small element on her character, her choice of footwear.
Now you look like one of us. But your shoes betrayed you.
These have gotten me out of a lot of scrapes. Where I go, they go. The kicks stay.
So it shall be.
This is a character that grew up poor on the streets of New York, yet as soon as she enters Disneyland and is handed a makeover, she chooses to keep her $2 Skechers on, and it's among the silliest shit that I've ever seen in any video game ever. Imagine playing Spider-Man and he was wearing worn-out tennis shoes with the soles falling off every time he walks. Imagine playing God of War and Kratos was rocking 90s style Adidases. Imagine playing Horizon and Aloy was pimping out Reebok pumps. The first reaction would be a resounding, what the fuck is this shit? And they made it worse because despite the fact that the rest of the character dresses in dark colors, her Skechers are white and dirty looking from the beginning of the game to the end. The only time Frey somewhat looks like she actually belongs in a scene in this game is during the final boss when she goes Super Saiyan and starts glowing like a nightstick with AA batteries stuck up her ass. It's actually insulting when you think about it. Here we have a Japanese development studio who made a modern game with a black female as the main protagonist, and these clowns can't even give the girl some proper footwear. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, this game has some of the most piss-poor excuses for writing and dialogue I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through for any video game I've ever played. The writing is so fucking terrible, so mediocre in its execution, that you can actually tell that they legit tried to make this good, but just couldn't.
Whoa, what the fuck was that?
Oh, one of my talents, if you will.
I don't care what happens to Athia. If it's saved or if it burns, I don't give a shit because this place is not my home. Leave with fucking pleasure. What? Excuse me? I just told you I'm the living heir to Ratanta, and you look at me like I've done the fucking dishes?
Well, you clearly don't think much of your lineage, so why should I?
Yeah, that sounds about right. People only give a shit when they want something from you.
Being an heir to a hunter is an honor, not a curse.
Cut the bullshit and let me out of here.
You know I can't do that.
You created this, so I'll say it again. Cut the bullshit and let me the fuck out of here.
Right, finally.
Where the fuck have you been?
I will explain later. First, let's find a way out of this mad woman's nightmare.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
What? How can you do this? This is outrageous. It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master? What kind of nonsense is this? Put me on the council and not make me a master? It's never been done in the history of the Jedi. It's insulting.
Oh, calm down, Anakin. You have been given a great honor.
Don't ask me to do that. Make a motion in the Senate where that kind of a request belongs. You thunder against me! You will not take it from me! Don't make me kill you. You underestimate my power!
Apparently, there was an original script penned and turned in, but then it was changed, altered significantly through multiple follow-up drafts until the final result was the shit show that's on display in the final product. Going over the story in summary, you play as a character named Frey, an orphan who was abandoned as an infant and left on the streets of New York to fend for herself. After bouncing between foster homes, she ended up homeless and got into some trouble, practically one step away from being a felon. A gang of juvenile delinquents chases her down because she owes them some money. They track her down and burn down this building she's taking shelter in. She takes her pet cat Homer and gives it to the judge, who gave her a second chance after realizing she can't take care of it herself. She then soon stumbles upon a magical bracelet that she names Cuff, who can somehow speak to her telepathically with a British accent for some strange reason. And together, Frey and Cuff stumble down the rabbit hole into the magical world known as Athia, that's been taken hostage by 4 corrupted lords known as Tantas, magical female deities with powers that they've used to enslave the people. Frey discovers she has powers like the Tantas, and the people look to her to dispose of the Tantas and free the world of Athia. First of all, the story presented here is silly. To put it in simple terms, this is Square Enix's version of Alice in Wonderland. The game even directly references Alice in Wonderland multiple times throughout the runtime, right down to a book of the classic fairy tale making an appearance in the game.
Yeah, I guess they don't give a fuck.
Then you have to factor that this story has been told and told better in other forms of media. One of the most famous examples from the film industry is The Matrix. In video game form, Far Cry 5 comes to mind, and even though the story in that game is a bunch of bullshit too, I'd argue that the execution is better there than it is here. The concept, while problematic, isn't the direct issue. The real problem with Forspoken's story are the fucking characters in the dialogue. And Jesus Christ, is it bad.
There's no way I'm letting myself lose this bitch.
I'm glad to hear it. What she's capable of.
Raining rocks now? This shit ain't fair.
Frey is one of the most unlikable pieces of shit I've ever had the displeasure of playing as in any video game. Her dialogue is fucking atrocious, laced with F-bomb after F-bomb for no apparent random reason other than to force an M rating with the ESRB. Every few seconds it feels like this character is just saying fuck and asshole and bitch for no reason. It happens in combat, it happens in cutscenes. It's just insanity to think that this kind of dialogue was written by someone who works at Square Enix. While Square Enix is no stranger to utilizing such language in their other games, the execution is done much better in games like the Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's constrained and not overused. Here, they clearly said, fuck it. Frey is a bad bitch who won't take anyone's shit, so you better not piss her off. Otherwise, she'll call you names and shout curse words faster than the foreigner who just discovered how the English language works. When the game isn't being purposely offensive with its storytelling and dialogue, it's instead being insulting with its stupid, poorly constructed combat system that's clearly unfinished. The system revolves around 4 main power sets that hinge on 4 different magical elements: earth, fire, water, and electricity. The starting power is earth, then you gain fire, then water with electricity coming towards the tail end of the main story. Each power set has a skill tree filled with a select number of abilities that can be unlocked and strengthened, a total of 2 times. The skill trees require something called mana, that the player must collect either by completing missions or finding rays of light in the open world in order to expend points to gain new abilities. Each power has 3 slightly different base attacks with a unique attack specific to each one. Then on the opposing shoulder button, you have access to multiple abilities per set that operates on a cooldown timer. When you expend all of the abilities for one power set, you can switch to another one on the fly, either using buttons on the controller or through the touchpad on the DualSense controller. On PC, this functions the same way it does with the console version. The system is easy to use, simple to understand, and some of the abilities, when you realize what works in conjunction with one another, is actually engaging to manipulate. Just like the rest of the game, the problem with the combat system is the execution. First off, one of the power sets is terrible, and isn't very useful in really any combat scenario, which is the water power set. Almost every single ability in that set is useless, and your base attack is too slow to be very effective. The electricity power set is fantastic and arguably the second best one in the game, but the problem is that it doesn't become available until late in the story. That leaves you with just earth and fire. The best power set in the game is the red magical element of fire, which you gain access to after killing Tanta Sila, the game's first major boss encounter. The reason the fire power set is so important and effective is due to the fact that it revolves around close quarters combat, unlike the other 3, which revolve around long range combat. It's also the best power set for crowd control, and out of the 4 magic powers, it's the most fun to use with the most pronounced effects on screen. However, it emphasizes just how mediocre Luminous Productions is at designing a competent combat system. The lock-on is fucking atrocious. It's just fucking bad. What the fuck? There is no dedicated auto lock-on that you would find in other action games. The standard combo attack with the fire ability will have Frey overshoot the player's intended target because there is no auto lock-on. Even when you are locked onto your target, Frey will still somehow manage to miss your fucking target, despite the fact that you're locked on. How Luminous Productions accomplished this bullshit, I'm actually intrigued to know, because I have no fucking clue. The movement is very stiff, and it feels about the same if not worse than the combat system that was present in Final Fantasy XV. The reason the other power sets aren't as bad when it comes to the targeting system is because they revolve around long-range combat. Another game that this can easily be compared to is infamous Second Son, which also utilizes 4 power sets with a melee system built in, and that game is more competently designed compared to Forspoken. The targeting system in Second Son works properly, and it just feels better to play by comparison. While having multiple abilities is a good idea, the cooldown system kills any momentum that the system has, which further ruins the pacing of the combat system. What's more, you'll find yourself using the same abilities over and over again, because there's only a handful that's truly useful when engaging enemies. This game with its mediocre combat system alone should have been delayed so it could have more development time devoted to improvements, but of course, that didn't happen. Then you have the actual balance of the game. That's shit. You have 3 separate difficulty levels in the game: easy, normal, and hard. Now typically I like to be challenged, so I set the game from the very beginning on hard difficulty. But as soon as I got to the Tanta Sila boss fight, and I realized just how grindy and repetitive and drawn out the actual fucking fights are, and the enemies are nothing but pure glorified damage sponges on that difficulty setting, I then tried to back out and bump the game back to normal. But because Square Enix is Square Enix and they love to make things fucking difficult, instead of simply just pausing the game and allowing me to change the difficulty setting, I had to quit the fucking quest. I had to quit the boss fight, and I lost more than fucking 25 minutes of gameplay. I had to run all the way back to the fucking boss and start again. And from that point forward, I didn't bother bumping the game's difficulty back up. This is simply a case of poor balancing. I'm not going to devote any time to explaining the ridiculously stupid nail polish customization system. From its implementation to even the lore surrounding it. It's a system that's so fucking embarrassing that I can't believe no one on the development team stepped forward to voice why they shouldn't put something that's clearly one-sided to one specific gender in here. Then again, I guess that explains why the LGBTQIA plus group, Black Girl Gamers, appears in the fucking credits for this mess. Now it makes sense why they went with an ethnic actress and character for the lead role. It was also they can pander to a small target audience that likely doesn't make up even a third of their consumer base. It's fucking disgusting. I legit have a sour taste in my mouth just thinking about it. Between the fucking terrible storytelling and dialogue to the unfinished twitchy combat system to the awful character design and phoned-in art direction with some god-awful lazy level design, Forspoken can be summed up in 2 words. Brain damage. It was brain damage that conjured this mess. And it's brain damage that you may be left with upon completion of this disaster from Square Enix. At this point, I have no faith for Square Enix to release a good game. The company at this point has made too many mistakes, and they continue to make the same blatant mistakes with every single game that they release. Why motherfuckers are looking forward to Final Fantasy XVI is beyond me, as that game showcases nothing new that we haven't seen before in other games, and it clearly goes against what made the franchise in particular unique by trying to turn the series into something it's not. The upcoming part 2 of the already ruined so-called remake of Final Fantasy VII will be more bullshit stacked on top of this company's joke of a track record. You have to be a fucking fool to have any sort of faith in Square Enix as an entity in the gaming industry. After all, this is the Japanese Ubisoft that we're talking about. As far as I'm concerned, this may be the last straw I have for Square Enix. Forspoken is a piece of dog shit. That's a poor attempt to earn the respect of a small laser-targeted demographic, which here is clearly a female audience. This is arguably one of the worst Square Enix games I've ever played, and I'm so beyond sick of their bullshit that this may be it for me. I have no interest whatsoever in discount Devil May Cry Fantasy 16. I have no interest in Final Fantasy 7 that's not actually Final Fantasy 7 Part 2. I have no interest in anything Kingdom Hearts going forward, and thankfully they sold all their other important IPs. This company is just out of touch with not just their core audience, but their IPs both new and old to boot. I'm sick of the mediocrity and the lack of effort, and it's because of games like this. Fuck Forspoken, fuck Square Enix, and if you don't like this video, well then, fuck you too.
But one thing I do get is you're not alone. Even when you think you are.
Man, this fucking game is so terrible, man. This is some next level bullshit right here. How they managed to pull a game that's this fucking terrible out of their ass. It's truly an accomplishment. Square Enix deserves some applause for this shit. Truly. And now we have the infamous alternate ending. You motherfuckers couldn't do this right with Nier Automata. I have no faith that you're gonna do it right here. Let's see, which path should I choose, left or right? I love decisions like this in games, because usually the choice is irrelevant. And the game's gonna funnel you along the path that it wants you to take, regardless of whether you want to take that path or not. So let me see what's going on here.
This is your choice. So be it. Goodbye, Alfred. I will always love you.
Bullshit. You think I'm kidding? I think you're bad shit crazy. That's what I think.
Where do we go now?
Fuck. That shit didn't even last 1 minute long, dude. What kind of fucking alternate ending was that? Imagine watching The Matrix and Neo arrives at the end just before he fights Smith, and then Morpheus comes out of a fucking portal or some shit, and he's like, are you sure you want to go down the rabbit hole? It's like, motherfucker, we're at the end. We're at the end of the story. What do you mean? What do you mean, are you sure? Get the fuck out of here with this trash, dude. Suck my motherfucking dick.